Hello and welcome back. Welcome back to the Soul Sync podcast. It's lovely to have you here. As you know, I'm psychic medium Jason Paul, and I'm coming to you today from a hotel room in Prague where I've currently been for 2 nights and still got 2 nights to go. And I came here alone just to have some Jason me time. And firstly, I do like a good break by myself. I've travelled a lot by myself over the years, and sometimes there's nothing better than just coming away alone by yourself and getting some proper you time. And it's been just a wild month for me. Obviously, as I said to you, I've sold my business completely unexpectedly. Didn't think I'd be finding myself in inverted commas, unemployed, sitting here talking to you. But I feel pretty liberated from it. I have to say, the first thing is, I've been so tired since I left my business, and it really has highlighted to me just how much of myself I gave to it. You know, it was my business. It was so much of my identity. Even the company's name was that of my initials. So since coming away, I've been trying to get used to what is my new routine, which the only thing that I have in my life at the moment, I say the only thing got in my life at the moment, I've got many things, Soul Sync, and I've got a list as long as my arm of things I need to do to get organised. But you know, mediumship has been taking up a lot of my focus and my time because firstly, I feel like I owe so much to mediumship because it came into my life a number of years ago now, which was really a quest for me to discover, firstly, if the spirit world was real, because I was petrified of death. I was in a place in my life where I just couldn't really understand life, and it kind of felt like my life was ticking away like an egg timer, and the older I'm getting, it's like the sand is sort of slipping away, as morbid as that sounds. So, you know, that discovery has taken me on a journey of a lot of healing. And I really tried to do a lot of courses in mediumship because last year, for instance, I did 4 courses, which I feel so blessed to even have been able to do that. But I knew my soul was telling me that I needed to do those courses, and I didn't question it because I just felt like that was what I needed to do. And even at the time, they were all over just a period of 6 months. But I felt that I had to throw myself into the mediumship, and it's helped me in so many ways. Firstly, I think mediumship is a journey of healing, and I feel that it's a calling. And I feel that for a lot of people, when mediumship or whatever first comes into their life, perhaps they're not in the best of place. Perhaps they're searching for answers. Some people get awakened in such a way that it's really traumatic. And what springs to mind is the last episode that I did with Fame Martin, where he talked about his life getting to a place where he was essentially face down in his own swimming pool, having a near-death experience, which was what catapulted him to awaken. And for me, I'd got to a place in my life where I'd struggled with copious amounts of addiction, trauma. Even when I went into recruitment, for instance, it was off the back of just leaving the police and being in a place where I was really desperate, in loads of debt, and I knew that I needed to rebuild my life. And to be honest with you, you know, when I look back now, there was a lot of fear underrunning. There was fear as an undercurrent. And what I essentially did was I knew that it was very much make or break. So, you know, I put every ounce of my being into that. And over a 3-year period, I'd saved up enough and accumulated enough money to then start my own business, which, you know, a lot of people would get some money, then start to enjoy it, maybe go on holidays and relax and enjoy just that period of existing. But for me, I felt that well, I'll tell you the story. Basically, I knew that I wanted to run my own company. Simple reason being, the other companies I'd worked for, there was always limitations in one sense or another, and I'd always had this burning desire to run my own company. At the time, and this was probably one of my last serious relationships, which again shows how much of myself I've given to my business in the fact that I haven't had a relationship in about 10 years. But anyway, my love life is a whole nother story. I was with this guy in Manchester, and one of the biggest worries I had about setting up the business was the business side of it. I wasn't necessarily worried about actually making money, but what I was worried about at that time was the tax side of it, running a business, not knowing anything about that. However, the partner that I was living with in a bungalow in Manchester had done a business degree, and he had run a number of small businesses that he'd set up, albeit they hadn't succeeded and they'd failed, but he had enough experience. So he'd assured me that he wanted to be involved, wanted to help me, was going to help me navigate the kind of setting up the company side of things. So anyway, I then go in to give my notice into my boss, who at that time was such a lovely guy and had stuck with me. And I felt so bad, I have to say, giving my notice in. But I did so and explained to him that, my intention was to set up my own agency, which he was very quick to remind me that I had 6 months restricted covenants in my contract. Essentially, I wasn't allowed to work within that industry for 6 months. Very standard practice with salespeople. And there was no way in the world I was going to breach that, because when I left the company before him to go to him, what happened, because I wasn't being treated very well at that company. So I left, then I joined him, and a lot of my clients then tracked me down, as they do, and said they wanted to work with me. And my boss at that time said, look, don't worry about it. You're not reaching out to them. They're reaching out to you. So that's fine. And he was an ex-lawyer who'd set up a legal recruitment agency. So that was good enough for me. Anyway, a few months went on. I'd been on a holiday with my partner to Mexico and came back, and there was this very intimidating, large document bundle. And when you get a certain letter, it's not good news. You get one of those brown envelopes and it's got the DVLA on it, or it's got the tax on it, and you just think, oh, go away, this isn't a letter I want. And I knew by virtue of the fact that this parcel of bundles of information, the fact it couldn't fit through the letterbox wasn't necessarily good news. So I opened that up, and that had court papers in there. Basically, they'd gone tooth and nail, sent my computer off for forensic analysis, and then made all these spurious claims. Now, I was very worried about that, because what it did was it brought up the trauma from my court case when I was in the police. And that was, really traumatic. And despite the fact that my boss at the time and my lawyer had said to me, look, Jason, don't settle this. It's going to be absolutely fine. I just wanted it off my plate, because they indicated that, look, worst case scenario, this could take 18 months to 2 years to sort of clear. And I thought, no, working in sales, you need to be in a good mindset. And having this dark rain cloud of litigation over me was just making me absolutely worried. So I thought, do you know what? I'm just going to settle out of court. So essentially, I settled for a crazy amount of money, tens of thousands of pounds, which in hindsight, I probably shouldn't. But what it meant is all the money that I'd accumulated at the first agency and had managed to save up, I then had to effectively start from all over again. So, as I do, gone down a lot of rabbit holes there. But since I've went away from my business and all of that has unfolded, first of all, I will say that I felt almost a bit discombobulated in a way, because my routine, I'm very much a routine person. And even the fact of, going to bed at a certain time, waking up at a certain time, I've just found myself wanting to sleep and sleep and sleep. And it's really made me aware of how much of ourselves we give to something without even realizing it. Like if you'd have asked me 6 weeks ago, my thoughts on my business, I'd have said, look, I give a lot of myself to it, but I try and make a lot of time for my mediumship, the spirit world, relaxing, doing, what I want to do with my life. But now I've stepped away, it's really made me aware, especially with my mediumship, just how much of myself I gave to that. And also how even when I would, for instance, do a mediumship reading, and it would be great, it would be great. The level of detail and the readings that I'm doing now are almost like, twice as good. And I don't want to start using these words like good, bad, etc., because I don't think that's helpful in mediumship. But, I've noticed that my readings are a lot more powerful. I've noticed that the level of information that I'm getting and how I'm really finding that my clairvoyance is so much more vivid. And I'm really feeling that I'm feeling so much more from the spirit person who is there with me. And I feel that so much of that is just because I'm actually in the present moment. And during this period, I feel so fortunate and have so much gratitude to be in this situation where I feel like I've got a blank canvas. I've kind of said to myself, I'm not doing anything work-wise other than mediumship and kind of creative endeavors until I've had 3 months off. And I'm just trying to, during this time, relax, because even, the best of us, we can find that our unhelpful ego and the chatter in our mind wants to chip in all the time with unhelpful stuff. And I've had it myself, over the last few weeks. I've, had thoughts such as, you haven't got a job, Jason, you need to think what you're going to do next and whatever. And I've just been going through this mental exercise of training myself to be very kind and just be in the moment and flow. And I think that's the most important thing. We can spend so much of our lives, and I have.
We'll be right back.
If you find this podcast helpful, please take a moment to spread the word by rating it or reviewing it wherever you listen.
Worrying about the what if, the buts, the maybes of the future. And when I look back at myself even a couple of years ago, and I say a couple of years ago, even more recently than that, how much I would struggle with anxiety. And anxiety has been something I've struggled with, so much in my life that I've almost come to, probably get used to existing with that going on. And, I almost kind of said as a badge of honor many times in my business that when I do tend to thrive the most is when I'm under the most pressure. I just sort of come into my own. And in the face of disaster, I'm probably the person you'd want to pick up the phone to. But it's really just made me, stop and really look at my life and kind of really start to do an exercise of trying to understand who the real Jason is, behind the labels, behind the lived experiences, behind the memory bank that most of our lives are driven by. I feel that in our lives, we obviously, from a very young age, learn how we want to. Let me say that again, actually. I was just about to say something, and then I thought, actually, that's not the right way to put it. In our lives, who are we? We are our lived experiences. We have so many beliefs that have come as a result of experiences that we've had. And I've really started to want to understand who is the true Jason. I can tell you now that the true Jason is someone who is quite at times theatrical, quite at times can be a little bit stern, is also a bit bonkers, and just wants to have fun and has a lot of, feminine energy and flamboyance. I would also say that the true Jason is very sensitive, but it's made me aware of just how much we identify with our bodies and with our names and with our lived experiences and with our limiting beliefs. Ultimately, if you're someone in life that, kind of believes physical death is the end, you're always going to be living a lot of life through fear, because a lot of our fears ultimately come down to, when you strip them back, the fear of dying in some way. Even, for instance, losing your job. What would be driving that anxiety and fear probably isn't the losing of the job itself. It's the undercurrent of losing an income, which means losing potentially food on the table, losing a house, which ultimately, the ultimate root of all of this is a fear of death. So when you have got to a place in your life when you believe and know that your physical death isn't the end, it allows you to live your life through a way of feeling much more empowered. And, I know myself, and I know this, I wouldn't even say I believe it, I know that we are an eternal soul, which when we're down here on the earth plane, we have unlimited potential. And you can see that by the fact that so many people achieve great things here. And even if you look at athletes, for instance, who can run a mile years ago, if we go back 40 years, athletes who would run a mile in under 4 minutes, no one believed it was possible to do that until the first person did it. And then when the first person did it, other people started doing it. But there's something in the fact that because no one had ever done it before, everyone believed it wasn't possible until one person believed it was possible and then broke that. So another thing that's been taking up a lot of my time in research in the last week is morphogenic fields. I have talked about morphogenic fields before on this podcast, probably called them morphic fields, but I've been looking into them because everything that we need to know in life is firstly available to us and accessible to us. But we believe a lot of the time that we have to figure out all the answers to ourselves. And when I've been looking into morphogenic fields, and it was first Rupert Sheldrake who wrote about these, he basically explained that there are fields of energy that we can tap into. So to explain this on a really basic level, you get a little turtle on a beach. How does that turtle know the very first time to head towards the water? What is that internal calling and that internal knowing that they have? Well, it's an imprint that lives within something called a morphogenic field. And a morphogenic field contains all the information that turtle needs to know. And as every generation of turtles goes forward, they add to the morphogenic fields, which is why humanity keeps evolving. Why is it, when we get born, we just know certain things? We're kind of conditioned, we understand things. It's because that has already been and lives within the morphogenic fields, which is what we access. Now, every single thing that has ever been achieved by the human race, that every human has ever done, lives within a certain morphogenic field. So we can access that information and that energy and that resonance if we believe that it's possible. Firstly, if you've got a limiting belief that you're not able to do something or whatever, you're not going to be able to do it. So one of the biggest things that I'm trying to untangle in my mind at the moment is the limiting beliefs that I've got, because as a human being, the journey that we go on, we can achieve anything. I truly believe this as human beings. And as I've said in this podcast before, I've come across stories that I completely believe in, of individuals who have done stuff that just is impossible, like, for instance, psychic surgery. I've also come across Chinese kind of witch doctors who can bend steel with just a hand. I've come across stories of individuals that have teleported GPS devices hundreds of kilometers away from where they are. I've heard stories of people that have pulled crystals from the air. How is it that they do that? Because they understand and they know that they can do that because they have the potential to do that. Whereas if I was to say to you, okay, pull a crystal from the air now, 99.9% of you, even 100% of you are going to think that that's not possible. And because you feel that way and that is your belief, guess what? It's not possible. So what I'm trying to do at the moment is to cut cords of a lot of the things that are just not serving me in my life, and to really step into who the new Jason is, and to start to form those new neural pathways. And I think that, what are we as human beings? If we actually look at our minds and we actually look at ourselves in each day, we are a repeat of the past. We very much have the same thoughts, the same beliefs that we did the day before. So a lot of us want change in our lives, but don't find that change comes in a positive way, because we are just repeating the thought patterns that we've had of previous days, which makes a lot of sense on a neurological level, because we are a series of neural connections, and in order to have change, new thoughts, etc., you have to form new neural pathways. And if you want to look into that, the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza is very, very, very interesting, because he really talks about that. And I feel that the first way to bring about change is to start to be aware of the language, firstly, of how you talk to yourself in your internal mind. So I'm trying to be very aware of the way that I'm talking to myself, and also the words that come out of my mouth. If you want to achieve something in your life, but you're talking in a way that isn't, for instance, if you want to achieve a partner, one of the big things I'd love is a relationship. I'm very happy in my life, and there's been lots of times in my life where, especially during my 20s, I would look outside of myself for love, but I've probably got lots of blocks about and limiting beliefs about my ability to find someone that's going to be right for me. And, that's internal work that I'm having to do. But, I would say that mediumship, I just owe so much of my life to. And that's why I feel in such service to spirit, because I feel that the spirit world have guided me so much, not just when I've kind of asked for it and reached out to them, but I believe that the spirit world, looking back now over the last few years, have been much more involved in helping me than I can even probably realise and compute, because, you know, the last 2 years have been pretty stressful. And even recent times with my work, I know that I owe a lot of the decision-making process to the spirit world. I won't go bog you down into all the twists and the turns of how they've helped me, but they've helped me and they've been there. And that's a beautiful thing. And mediumship has really helped heal me. So I'm on a bit of a journey at the moment, Soulsync, to really look at the beliefs that I hold, because I know this next chapter of my life is very much about me helping people to be the best version of themselves that they can possibly be, and to live the life that they want, to get their dreams to come true, and not to allow fear to hold you back, and not to allow fear to hold people back, because it does so much. And even if I look at, you know, so much of the decisions that I've made in the past, they've been very much fueled by an undercurrent of fear. And these days, Soulsync, I am not willing to do that. I am not willing to live through a lens of fear. And I've just been trying to exude massive amounts of gratitude at the moment, because I believe that gratitude is the quickest way to change your vibration. And even the last conversation with Fame Martin, when he talked about doing a gratitude bomb, was so interesting. And I actually the next day went and did that. I was in Superdrug, and there was a man, just an old man, just walking out the door, and his bag was leaking some kind of liquid. And then I thought, yes, I've seen my opportunity today for mass amounts of kindness to a stranger, to get that feeling. So I basically helped him clean up the floor. His bag was all sticky. I waited there whilst, you know, he went and got some paper, and I just made sure he was okay. And true as Faye Martin said, it left me feeling amazing. But that conversation really got me thinking on a lot of levels about, you know, the act of kindness, and how when Fane described that this certain chemical that's released from the brain is only released if you do the act of kindness to a stranger, it's really got me thinking quite a lot, actually. So it did work, and I did feel a rush of chemicals, good feeling chemicals that I'd say I've not felt before. So I've almost been sort of going around with one eye open, where to spread kindness and love too. But I honestly believe that gratitude is one of the most quickest ways to change your vibration. And even in the most difficult circumstances, there's always something to be grateful for. And I was even thinking back to, you know, some of the tough times in my life, some of the tougher relationships that I've had. And I went through the exercise the other day of starting to think about things, even in those tough relationships, that I was grateful for. And in that moment of feeling that and thinking about the things I was grateful for, I did feel that I healed in that moment, that I let go of some of the things that I was holding on to energetically, that lived within me, an emotion that was trapped, that I've suppressed over time. And that act of looking through a lens of gratitude allowed me to let that go. And there's a lot to be said for letting go. Recently, I read a book by David R. Hawkins called Letting Go, and it talks all about how, as human beings, a lot of the time, what we do is we either suppress or repress our emotions. And we do that, and it causes us so much damage, disease. It affects us in so many ways. So, and I know that, you know, a lot of people around me, family members, struggle with talking about their emotions, but it's really important that you outlet them, because if you don't, they'll end up living within you. And a lot of the time, people don't even become aware of how it's affecting them until such point that they might get a disease. But the problem with the Western medical system a lot of the time is we're treating symptoms rather than getting to root causes. And there's a very interesting episode of the Soulsync coming up very soon, where I'm going to publish an episode where a guest who specialises in quantum energy and personal development took a photo of mine and basically put it in this quantum entanglement machine. And effectively, that photo said so many things about me which were 100% correct in terms of diagnosis. So it's really got me thinking about, what it is that I want to release, who old Jason is and who new Jason is, and what things new Jason doesn't want to take forward. And that all starts with all these changes. It really starts with, in my mind, me starting to become aware of the language and the words that I use, both internally in the own chatter of my mind and internally. So morphic fields, just to say, if you want to look into them, I would really recommend them. Go onto YouTube and there's a channel called Morpheus Fields, and you can play different morphogenic fields to achieve different things. So I've been listening to some recently there's one called the Hero Protocol. Look into it, but that's all about upgrading lots of different aspects of yourself. But I've also been listening to morphogenic fields for sleep, for love, for self-love, and, for kind of healing myself in order to potentially put myself in the world of relationships. But going through a crazy amount of change. I have been doing lots of psychic work, lots of mediumship work. I've been exploring Prague, which is such a beautiful city. I feel like I'm really starting to show my age now because I'm really starting to appreciate architecture of buildings. And I was walking around earlier and some of the buildings were just blowing my mind by the age of them. And I was looking at some buildings that are over 800 years old. And I thought to myself, how much energy and blood, sweat and tears must have gone into building that building 800 years ago. And it's really amazing when you just stop and become more present, how you can really feel the energy of buildings and that's another thing I love doing is going into churches actually and just sitting and being and feeling. So I've been in quite a few churches and cathedrals since I've been here, but I just thought I'd come on, say hello, tell you a bit about what I've been up to, have a natter. And, it's an interesting time for lots of us at the moment. I feel that change is in the air for a lot of sensitive people. And what I'd say to you is, if you are wanting to bring change about, just be really, really aware of how you talk to yourself. Because I know so often I put myself through the mincemeat machine of, Jason, you should have done more. You should have done more of this. You should have done more of that. And, you need to give yourself encouragement. Self-love and love is the most important thing. So if you are in a vibration of fear right now, or you are giving yourself a tough time, really try and work on that because it's so damaging. And a lot of the time you don't realize how much it's holding you back in life. I feel that a lot of the time change is something to be embraced. And even through our toughest times, a lot of the time, that's what makes us learn and grow. And those are where we basically get the tools in our toolkit to then move forward. So it's lovely to come on and talk to you, my darlings. And, I'm going to enjoy the next couple of days in Prague. It's quite a symbolic trip for me. And before I actually started my business, as soon as I left my last job, I went to Thailand just to gain a sense of perspective for a bit of time. And I feel this trip is all about just having some time to rest, relax, and ultimately just be. And on that note, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.